Karl Lehenbauer, and I am the co-founder of FlightAware and Chief Technology Officer since 2005. I'm a very, very early user of Tcl'. I got John Osterhood to email me a copy of it when we had email to the internet, but not real internet, back in 1990 or so. And invented a number of things that you probably used. This part of Tcl', like anchor and open and close and seek and tell and get some puts and upbar. One of my, I don't know, I'm both loved and reviled for that. So I want to talk about the Tcl' bounties. As hopefully a lot of you know, that FlightAware has offered bounties for fixes and enhancements for Tcl' and for Tcl' extensions. Donald referred to this as a series of grand challenges, which I just love. I think we should just call them grand challenges for Tcl'. And this comes from like there was kind of a golden era when John Osterhood was at Sun and had a team of people, and a lot of stuff came out, like Tcl'8 came out of that Unicode, the bytecode compiler, and just a lot of cool stuff happened. I want to also say, you know, that money talks, as they say, right? Because I know everybody's really busy and people have jobs and careers and lots of stuff to do besides things I want to have be done for Tcl'. So why do we offer bounties? First of all, obviously just to fix things that are broken. And we're going to review some of the bounties and what happened with those. And then to make Tcl' go faster. This is a big deal for us. We have a lot of programs that are, you know, we're running hundreds of copies of the program. And if we can make Tcl' go faster, that just saves us machines, and actually in some cases it can't go fast enough even that it's parallel. So if it goes faster, that's a big deal for us. And then to make Tcl' a better language. Okay, we have a long conversation on what that means, but what I generally mean when I talk about Tcl' being a better language is that it is easier to understand people's code, that it's easier to write code in. You know, that in reading it, I can understand, you know, what it is, and there's not a lot of things in there that aren't necessary to achieve whatever it is you're trying to say. Now, I'm not talking about like Perl, where, you know, it's a point of pride to write an 18-character long program that nobody can understand. So it's not like, what's the minimum number of characters to accomplish this? I'm looking for clarity in the code more than tininess. So let's review some of the bounties and the results. Okay, so we had a bounty for Scotty. For those of you who haven't heard of it, Scotty is an extension that is for network management. It can talk SNMP, it can send datagrams, multicast packets, all sorts of, you know, ping packets, which are ICMP packets and things like that. And that bounty was fulfilled and paid. Another thing you might have heard yesterday in Shannon's talk, SO reuse port on the server, which allows you to open a server socket on a port that a server socket's already open on. That was something that needed to be part of the core, or I guess it could be done in an extension, but really ideally needed to be part of the core, and that was paid. Tcl' read line, does anybody not use Tcl' read line and just type Tcl' at the command line and they don't have any facility with tab to complete command names and stuff like that? Oh my God, you're gonna love this. Okay, Tcl' read line plugs into GNU read line and it brings the command line editing, like if you're an Emacs person or a VI person, no E support yet, Richard, but you can sit there and hit escape and you can cursor up and down through your history and www, dw, cw, like as a VI person, those are key sequences I would use to edit the command line. You can tab to complete a command name. We got it to be like iTcl and OOTcl aware and stuff, so it can complete method names and things like that. And that was fulfilled and paid. Tcl TLS, very important thing for us. You know, it allows you to do encrypted sockets. Once you get the socket open, it works just like a normal TCP socket. And these are things we wanted it to do, like there was a new version of TLS that wasn't supported. There's hangs in the protocol negotiation. Sometimes we get background errors without an error message. And we wanted to work with Libra SSL. For those of you not in the know, OpenSSL had achieved a lot of crud over the years that made it insecure in some really alarming ways. And Libra SSL is sort of a ground-up rewrite of that. And that was paid. One thing on that is that there are still some hangs in protocol negotiation as far as we can tell, so we're going to be looking to see that remedied. The Tcl' Pro debugger was something after John Oster, who left Sun, he founded this company called Scriptix, which was venture capital funded for a while until the venture capital hijinks caused the company to be destroyed, but they wrote the Tcl' Pro debugger and some other stuff, and they open sourced all of that. And so we wanted to bring that back to life, and that was done, and that was paid. Now that we have the Tcl' Pro debugger and we've used it, it's funny, like, if you have a debugger and you use it a lot, then you're kind of like, oh my God, how did I ever live without this debugger? And then if you lose the debugger, then you work without it and you don't care. And a lot, I think it's valid to debug with print statements or whatever the equivalent is of that, and typing things in at the command line. But the Tcl' Pro debugger has a very clunky, like 1995 user interface. And so we'd like to see some more on that. I'll talk about that in a minute. We write Tcl' Pro, yeah?
We did find on the first day 3 production bugs that would have blew up at runtime. And we fixed all those. We found other bugs.
Oh yeah, we found bugs, yeah.
And we fixed bugs with it.
So it actually, it's real and it's out there, and you guys can download it and use it. So we write programs sometimes that have thousands of TCP connections. We do a lot of FreeBSD and an increasing amount of Linux, and by default on FreeBSD programs can only have 1,024 sockets, and but there's a way to build Tcl' for more sockets, but then it uses the select system call, and there's kind of a lot of overhead in select, and so there's this newer stuff, epoll and kq, that are ways to get events when data is ready on a socket or when a socket's ready to receive data. And so we looked to get that done, and that was paid. So that's showing up in Tcl'. We wanted to see some introspection improvements in the package command because there was no like legal way to find out what files were in a package, and that was fulfilled and paid. So, I mean, this is good stuff, right? There's some really nice things that are happening from this. Another project was to speed up clock format and clock scan, and we do a ton, like an unbelievable amount of clock formatting and clock scanning, and we format for 15 or 20 different locales. And is that me? Sure is. I'll talk to them later. And so, the Kevin Kenny, great to see you here. Kevin's the Time Lord. He worked out all this, like, time zones are just insane worldwide. Governments very capriciously change their rules year by year. Different countries have half-hour time zones. It's a really tough problem, and he solved that problem. And we were just looking for a way to make it go faster. And that is payment pending with an external package called Tcl' Clock Mod, which is available on GitHub.
At what level?
Peter?
No, what level? 2.4 or 10?
10. Yeah,
Wow.
10. And we are still looking to see that back into the core, but there were some concerns, and then rather than sort of waiting and fighting to get it into the core, the fellow agreed to make it into an external package and bid, and we're happy with it as far as
Right. Yeah, it's mostly issues with him answering questions.
With what?
With him answering our questions.
Well, we need to get, yeah, the reason payment's pending instead of paid is because he's having a hard time telling us how to pay him, so I guess.
We'll answer your questions.
I don't have to complain about the core team for this one, so that's really good. But anyway, we are really excited about it, and and we hope that everybody will eventually get the benefit from that. So I want to go over the rules for the bounties quickly, because we've got bounties still available, and we're going to be making some new ones. So all the code, if you take on one of the bounties, has to be released under the same Berkeley license that Tcl' and pretty much all the Tcl' extensions and stuff are. And we'll pay half of the money when the code, if it requires Tcl core changes, we'll pay half up front when it's accepted, and then half when it appears in the release. And we've bent that rule for people just because they wanted their money and they had actually done all the work. For bounties under $10,000, once it's accepted or accepted by the package manager, we'll pay, and then over that we'll pay, and then when it comes out in the release. I think that might have been in the prior slide. Sorry about that. So now the thing of, like, I don't want somebody to work on something, a bounty, and somebody else to work on a bounty, and this person finishes, and this person doesn't, but does a ton of work, and then this person gets the money, and this person doesn't. So, but we've got to have some sort of way of arbitrating that. So here's kind of our way. It's a let's all be reasonable is the plan, right? So the first person to succeed wins the bounty. If you succeed as part of a team, you all apportion the money amongst yourselves. So that's up to you all to decide. If you take on a bounty, we request that you announce your intention to take on the bounty. And likewise, if you have worked on a bounty for a while and you decide you're not going to do it, that you would just say, hey, look, I give up on this, or I'm not going to do it, right? And so, likewise, if somebody says they're doing a bounty, that doesn't mean you can't do it. Because, a lot of people say they're going to do stuff and don't. That's just kind of the nature of life. Things intervene. Now, like, this is really sad for me because of the phenomenal work these guys are doing. Donald can't take the money because of his university work. And Kevin can't take the money because he works for General Electric and they don't allow that stuff. However, the money will still be delivered to, like, a charity of your choice or to the Tcl Community Association. Like, we will still pay, and we appreciate your work, that you're doing it anyway without the hope of receiving the remuneration. And then lastly, FlightAware employees can participate but not double dip. So you can take on a bounty and win it and get paid, but not at work. All right. So here's some of the bounties that haven't been paid. Tcl-X is an extension for Tcl. It has a lot of stuff in there. There's a profiler. It doesn't work anymore. I don't even know about this one now.
It's still core dumps. I
know it core dumps, but I don't know about the possibility of really fixing it.
Someone else, and I can't remember the name, and I apologize. I guess they're not here. But there was somebody else and we both made some changes and did some testing and stuff, and we got it to work.
Really?
But it's slower than it used to be, and that's because the whole technique was changed.
Right.
The way it does profiling.
Well,
We just kind of left it because we weren't sure, we didn't feel comfortable with the slowness of it.
Okay. Well, you can talk with me and Shannon this evening or something.
I'll have to dig up the code.
We'll see where
it's at.
These are not compelling. There's a couple things on arrays. The first two things. Default values for arrays. It's something I kind of wanted for a long time. Effectively, if you're using Anchor, arrays have a default value of 0, right? But they don't. Another example would be a default value of an empty string or a default value of an empty list for an array. That sort of would facilitate not having to write if not info exists, array. Actually, Elepen would implicitly create two. Array for each. If you look at the array names or array get marshals the entire array, which if the array is gigantic, it produces an enormous list. And there's a whole like array start search, array next, array done business that I invented 20 plus years ago that sucks, and nobody to my knowledge has ever used it, and it's just not right. And array for each would do the managing of the key as it moved through the array behind the back of the user and would not cause the entire array to be marshaled into a list like array names or array get would. So we'd like to see that. I just think that would be a nice feature for Tcl.
The thing about that is that currently to actually go through the array, it is not actually any faster than just going and grabbing the whole list and stepping through the array. because of the way triggers on variable settings work on arrays.
Even if you break every 1,000 times?
You can have a look at, there's a whole discussion about it on the issues page for the bounty program on GitHub.
Okay, go ahead.
I have this implemented in the TSL version, and I don't actually reify any of the variables. So you could get the keys, and you can selectively filter them without having to make any objects. It does exactly what it's asking. I can talk about how that's done. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay, cool. And then, you know, it's kind of interesting there isn't a C API for looking at arrays at all. Like we can look through hash tables and stuff, but there's nothing for like walking an array. So that's neat that you've done that. I'm curious about that too.
Objects too.
For those of you who love operating systems and systems programming and stuff, we have so signals are a real pain in threaded programs because you need the signal to get delivered to the right thread. That doesn't work very well. Tcl'2017 can trap signals. Tcl'2017 can fork. It does a lot of the Unix system calls. It provides native implementations that work in a ticklish fashion. And so threaded programs that trap signals are prone to deadlock. We'd like that to be fixed if if that floats your boat. Also, Tcl gratuitously eats child process exit status. So that means those programs are going to be really tricky to write. Programs that fork off a lot of children and stuff like that. And we can explain that in greater detail to someone who's interested.
Yeah, again, there's people looking at that. There's a thread in the issues page on the
Okay, cool. And we're offering $5,000 for that. And we'll see. FlightAware is our Raspberry Pi thing for receiving ADS-B broadcasts from aircraft, and there's a very hairy function in there called FA sudo that does everything just right, and it's brutal. Upvar, like the main use of upvar is to pass a variable name to a proc. In fact, when I implemented Anchor, I tried to write it in high-level Tcl, and without upvar, it's actually a brutally difficult thing to write because there was no way to pass like the name of the variable, and so you end up trying to use uplevel, and you have to do all this quoting to get the right part to uplevel and the other part to not, and all this business. That was the impetus of upvar, and what I would like, so this is how we might normally do it. Like we have a function, a proc called find flight plan from position that takes a flight plan array and a position array. And so we code this all the time. Actually, there's a missing underscore right here, upvar $_ flight plan to flight plan, $_ position to position, and then we use them. And so I'd like this to be like find flight plan from position with caret, which I stole from you, Dave. I thought that was just, I had toyed with asterisk, from C, or ampersand from C, and I saw the caret in your presentation yesterday, and I was like, caret is a beautiful thing. So we really, really like to see that. I don't use the word syntactic sugar a lot, especially around Tcl, because Tcl is mostly done with commands. We don't have a lot of syntax in our language. We'll still fit on a page, but this is one. I think this may also help with some of the attempts to compile because you would know, I don't know if that's true or not, but
We're already doing.
great. So we'd like to see that. And this is one that kind of got bogged down for us, a first-class high-performance, non-hackish way to do name parameters. So, if you write a proc or a function in C or in any language and you have more than 4 or 5 arguments, it starts to get really out of control. And if you have 10 arguments, and it's like foo, comma, 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 I, comma, J, comma, 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 K, you go crazy. It's really hard to read and really hard to understand. And in particular, if you think about a proc, right? So we can say proc, and we can have, right now we can have the variables and we can have default values, right? But so it's like the third argument, I want the default value to be passed, but the fourth argument I have to send a non-default values, so I have to actually, in my call, give the value of the thing I don't care about because I've got to give a new value to a later variable in the definition. Now, to me, we have a model that shows us how to do this, which is TK. So if you look at these C programs, people who are trying to do expletives and stuff with C, it was brutal, right? I mean, look at any TK, any widget in TK, they have like 40 arguments, right? You can set the background and the foreground and the color and the size, and all this stuff. And imagine if we had to make calls with positional parameters, and so we would be saying basically, circle, comma, white, comma, black, comma, 40, comma, 30. We would go crazy. And John solved this, and it kind of, and we see the very naturally in iTickle as an example where you have dash key value. So I don't know all the specifics of what happened. I don't want to name names, but I'd like to see this still happen and become part of the language.
For this one and the previous one,
Yeah.
does it have to be to proc, or could an alternate?
Sounds like an end proc for name.
Yeah.
It does not have to be part of proc.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if you want to do something else, it doesn't. I kind of think the carrot can be part of proc. Dave.
That's fully, I had to do that, by the way, for VB in the .NET implementation for Microsoft. But, that's a lot of stuff. I have this fully implemented TSL. I'm happy to share how it looks.
Great.
How to do it.
We'd like to, well, you can make some money too, so.
There's also a tip in Flight for something very like this, that the spec was almost there, and what I gather is that the person proposing it got discouraged by the bike shed brigade.
Yeah, Kyan.
Have you had a look at the CauseOgs stuff that I presented last year on this?
I did, and it was part of the impetus for it, but I don't want to call a function. You know what I mean? I want it in the core. I don't want it to be any slower, just a little tiny bit slower. But actually, I think it's right on the right track. Because like we use GetOpt or whatever it is, a lot of times in our command line processing. And I totally believe that it works. I totally believe in the approach. I'm looking for higher performance.
It's pretty much the same performance as parsing CauseOgs.
All right, never mind. Let's cancel. No, we'll look at it. Thanks. So back to the Tcl Pro debugger. We'd like to see it modernized and work with everything else. And so I got a question mark because we haven't quite thought it all out, but Eclipse is the open source incredible environment and debugger and stuff, and it'd be really cool if we could debug Tcl just alongside people debugging other stuff. Dave.
Suggestion that you also just add making it work on like the Chrome debugger.
Okay, yeah. We can.
It's got a
we can
really
look at
easy
that.
interface. It's web-based.
And Shannon, you were saying GDBs is all like you just implement these functions and then GDB could do it, right?
Visual Studio Code, I'd add to this list as a candidate.
I've worked it.
Oh, it's not good.
It's a huge amount of work to really plug in the debugger. It's not easy.
Yeah, it's not good, but it has well-defined interfaces.
It
and
does. Right.
You work in Emacs and all that stuff.
All right. And here's our famous bounty offer for the Tcl core, and I think we're going to pay out. I'm not going to be like, hey, you're only 9.1x, right? If the quad code stuff, a lot of people have attempted to compile Tcl. Back to the 90s and stuff, and it's really been a daunting problem because of because of variable tracing and things like that, right? There's just the dynamism of Tcl is so great, it's hard to compile. And I want to re-articulate that we're willing to accept limitations. It doesn't have to be able to compile every single proc. If it can compile a lot of procs and they work properly, we'd be really happy with that. And we're really looking forward to trying to compile it. Okay, so going from here, like I kind of alluded to, a bit bummed out by the resistance.
Carl, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I had stepped away from the community for 4 years. What resistance? People were actually objecting to? This is very much.
Somebody mentioned bike shedding. I think that sometimes people go okay, now I'm like 10,000 feet on this, so I don't know exactly all the intricacies, so some of the stuff I'm about to say is wrong. And I'm not going to name names because I don't know the names. But there's a couple things that happen where sometimes maybe somebody goes crazy with ideas that haven't proven themselves at all, but now are proposed to be part of something, or somebody just wants to jam the brakes on and then can grind the whole thing to a halt.
Okay.
And so that's what so that, like, I understand that there is resistance. Like, we got PL-Tickle, the procedural language for Postgres, and it took us a long time to get our changes accepted. And it took a thick skin because they don't just say no, but they say they say hell no, right? And ultimately we did, and it's really cool. And by the way, if you use Postgres, the PL-Tickle it runs on the server. You can write trigger based, and you can write stored procedures in Tickle, and they're about 40 times faster than the ones in PL/PG-SQL, which is like the sort of official language, and that's before we made it all supporting Tickle OBJs and stuff like that. So, when you've got some big loop body or something like that, it's all compiled versus being, going through the old interfaces and getting thrown away every time. Just again, my 10,000 or more like 100,000 foot view, I think the core team has done a fantastic job maintaining Tickle compatibility. Straight Tickle programs from 20 years ago will run unmolested. Somebody just told me that they revived a 20-year-old TK program, and it had like 3 little minor changes, and I wasn't specifically talking about TK, but that's phenomenal. There's tons of Tickle out there. There's way more than you guys are aware of. You know what I mean? The place I get my hair cut, I'm watching them on this touch screen, and I'm like, that is TK. And how do I know it's TK? Because it's Bisq, for the background. We were getting a tour at NASA and walking through space station control, and I'm looking at the screens, and I'm like, that is TK. And I went home and I Googled NASA TK, and yeah, they're totally using TK to manage the space station from the ground and stuff like that. So Cassini, yeah. So it's a I think in a way we're almost a victim of our success, that people find out about this stuff, they build things in it, it's rock solid. Of course, it was huge in testing, test systems and test architecture and stuff. And I don't know if they don't want to come to the conference because they don't want to admit they're making money off of it, or if they just feel like I don't need to go because I have everything I need. But you got to understand, it's way bigger than we are. The reliability, you guys have done a great job on maintaining the reliability. Like, very few bugs have come out in new versions of Tickle. There were a couple. There was a thing where how far leaked memory and stuff, and I understand why the test didn't pick that up. And although it was a shock and kind of painful, it wasn't, it's a very, very small thing out of all the stuff that's happened. And when I say here measured improvements, I can't even begin to list, but you look at the new switches and L-sort and stuff like, I know that was a spam call. If you look at these switches that have gotten added to L-sort and stuff, you're just like, oh yeah, that's really good. That's a very clear and correct thing to do to support different ways of wanting to sort, different kinds of input. And some genuine innovation. Who did the curly bracket star curly bracket?
Well, that was the secret vote, wasn't it?
So the deal with that, right, is I've got a list and I want to append it on a list flat. I don't want to append the entire list. I want to append all the elements of the list. And so that used to be require a val, and it always made me nervous to code that, and so that is some new syntax for Tickle that really, really freaking works.
And history is the entire team agreed it was a good idea. It nearly foundered on the arguments over what was the right symbol to use for it. Jeff committed it with curly star curly.
Without taking a vote.
Committed it with
Like
curly star
emergency
curly and
vote.
dared us to revert.
There you go. Well, I think we need more of that. But only good things, not stupid things. Okay, so one conclusion is we're going to try to do stuff outside of the core if it can be done outside of the core. I mean, you can look at a certain thing and go, well, if this was in the core, it'd be great because it can make bytecodes. And you know, if I'm looking at variables from C, it's not as efficient as with the slots and the stuff. But that way, we're not sort of tied to the release cycles of the core. And then I think if you know something is really shown to be really good and really shown to be really useful, then it can get adopted in the core. Like Eleton, you know, was not Eleton, Elisine, you know, as an example of something that was in Tcl'. There were a lot of things that were in Tcl' over the years that eventually made their way into the core as their value was proven. Okay, so. The Tcl' Bounties document is still up on GitHub, github.com/FlightAware/Tcl' Bounties. And we're looking also for suggestions for things that meet one of those criteria of, you know, fixing problems with Tcl', making Tcl' a better language, and making Tcl' faster. Obviously, that's kind of covered. Last of all, let's grow the community. You know, we've got a date for the next conference. There are a lot of people who were big hitters, you know, in the 90s or in the early 2000s and stuff. It would be amazing to get him back. For those of you who've met Michael McLennan, he's just like this engine of inspiration and stuff. I would love to have him come. If everybody brought one person, you know, next year, we definitely have to have that wall pushed open back there. I just think, you know, like let's grow our community. Let's make Tcl' something that, languages go out of fashion through no fault of their own, right? Facebook's go-to language is PHP, and we all know PHP sucks totally, right? And the time when PHP was hot was 20 years ago and maybe 10 years ago, and it's only the cachet of Facebook that allows them, you know, to hire PHP developers. If you create something in today's hottest language and that thing becomes real, in 10 years you're going to still be coding in that language, and that language will probably be out of fashion. Our language is a little bit out of fashion, and I don't know what to do about it. I sort of toy with that. We should just rebrand it, like put in some new feature and give it a whole new name and claim it's new, you know, and then let them argue about it on Hacker News. And I like Rivet as the name, and Damon invented the name Rivet for the Apache module that FlightAware uses very heavily to plug Tcl' code into our web pages. And I really wish John had thought of Rivet instead of Tcl'. We don't even agree on how to pronounce Tcl'. Is it Tcl' or is it Tcl'? It's only been in existence for like 27 years, and we still can't even agree on what to call it. We are willing to provide some design resources. We have 2 full-time designers. I think they're terrific. If you cruise through the FlightAware website, I think it's beautiful. And you know, we would be willing to they're quite busy, but we'd be willing to put them on some of the things. I think if someone is like, Tcl', let me find out about it, and they Google Tcl' and they kind of go to what the resources are, they're kind of might be left with, well, is anybody actually maintaining this? I don't know, you know. So, you know, if it was very slick and very cool looking and stuff, I think that could matter. And we're willing to help with money. You know, we're not, we don't have a bunch of gushing oil wells or anything like that, but we are a growing company and we are profitable, and we love Tcl'. We have a ton of Tcl' code, and we're willing to put resources behind it and make it better. So if you've got ideas for bounties that you think will make Tcl' a stronger language, if you can see where we could help in recruiting new people, come talk to us. Okay. Take our damn money! That was the voice I imagine Damon would use to read this. So, yeah, take our money, you know, go invent this stuff, get paid. Obviously, we have paid on the other stuff, and like I said, we're willing to bend our rules if things are taking a long time and you need the money. And that's all.
Thank you.
All right, any questions or anything?
That's not the actual FlightAware plane.
No, it's not. You'll notice it's also backwards.
And